begin with, I thought that we could start with short readings and give a very briefly before we start the readings is the idea is to look at, as the title of the session says, how India is reflected, or what idea of India these individual authors engage with in these particular novels and in their other works. But I think at Aranango. So, for instance, just because we had a conversation with Richard and I, which is, it is about India, the book, but it is about else, and India is almost, I'm not sure this is the best way to say it, but I can't find a better way to say it. It's almost incidental to the larger story and the stories of characters. So you arrive at the idea of India almost circuitously. So it won't be an easy kind of pat question to put in the context of that kind of book. But anyway, we'll see what passages I read, and then we'll take the conversation forward. To begin with you, Sandeep, if you could read a passage from your novel. Thank you, Ravi. How much time do we have?
The passage that you have.
Yeah, I have two small ones. Because the book is on Journey of India, so I thought one small paragraph on Journey of India, and then one slightly amusing one.
Sure. I'm sure just 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Ravi. Nice meeting everyone here. Thank you all for coming for this session. So my book is story of the last 50 years of India, social, cultural, economic change in India, and it's narrated in story and anecdotal form. So I'm just reading one quick paragraph which is slightly serious in nature, and then I'll read the amusing one after that. My mother had lived in Calcutta in the early 1940s. I just met Richard Ji and we were talking about Calcutta in the 1940s, so I had to read this. My mother had lived in Calcutta in the early 1940s. She would describe what she saw during the 1943 Bengal famine. Totally emaciated men, no more than skeletons, were fighting with dogs amidst garbage for morsels of rotten food. Bharat, where the light of universal consciousness reflected off the Himalayas onto the minds of the sages and translated into the Vedas, where the greatest of men put honor above kingdoms and stoically walked in her forest for 14 green years,
where the wisest of souls played the flute and whose celestial words inspired the finest scripture of spiritual knowledge, and whose GDP well into the 18th century was 25% of the world's income. In that same Bharat, I still saw much deprivation in my growing up years. Though thanks to agriculture science, with the white and green revolutions, the country had overcome to a large extent that abject misery of the 1943 famine. So this was one paragraph because it kind of captures the journey of our country. And now I'll read something more amusing. Whatever is true of India, its opposite is also true, said the famous economist Joan Robinson. She was a British economist. Of the numerous ways to try and understand the heterogeneity of India, the simplest is to experience her sights and sounds in different parts of the country, the foods, the dresses, the predominant vocation and trade, religious beliefs, monuments, art and music, dialects and exclamations. As was his wont, Eklavya, one of the protagonists, had his own somewhat insightful, somewhat amusing, but always innocuous descriptions of various regions of India. He had mentioned to me a few years back that North India is about demonstration of power. Emotion predominates eastern part of India. The West is professional and business-like, while South India is driven by systems and processes. Anybody thinking of India in these terms would not be wrong, but would also be far from correct. Northern part of India is not just an expression of power. It's also not just hockey, paddy and wheat fields, chole bhature and rajma chawal. Ganga and Yamuna, Bhangra and Dholak, the revered Ayodhya of Ram and Mathura of Krishna, Taj Mahal, Firosha Kotla, and Oe Hoy, Mar Sotya, Bhaiya, and Paji. This is how we speak in North India. Nor is East just emotion. It is also not just football, argumentative economists, fish curry and rice and rasagulla, the tea plantations, Rabindra Sangeet, Brahmaputra and Hooghly, the venerated Durga Puja and Pandals, Eden Gardens, and Khoop Halo and Ori Baba. The western region of India is professional and businesslike, but not just that. It is also not just cricket, Bollywood films, Vada Pav and Thepla, industries and financial institutions, the Dandiya, Somnath Temple, Goa beaches, Narmada, Wankhede Stadium, Ice Shapat, and Kemcho. And South India, with its systems and processes, is much more and not just chess, scientists and engineers, IT parks and auto manufacturing, idli and dosa and filter coffee, the shrines Tirupati and Sabrimala and Meenakshi Temple, Carnatic music and Bharatnatyam, Kaveri Chapok, Ayyo, Ama, Pah and Che, which are exclaimed in admiration and revulsion respectively. Last line. The states and regions of India have a richness in variety which when described would invariably require the qualification that whatever is true of India, its opposite is also true.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is a really good hour to actually be taking an afternoon nap. And I hope our session doesn't leave you getting there. We'll try and keep it okay. Thank you. I'll start my reading. Ravi said we'll see what they read, but actually he gave me very strict instructions on what to read over lunch. Luckily the portion he picked out for me to read is something I have read in public before, so I should be able to get through it without stumbling too much. A little bit, and apologies to Ruchi who's probably heard this, we've done a few sessions before, we should be a traveling act together. This is a portion where the protagonist of my novel Rail Song, she's in 16 and she escapes her house, runs away across the country from a railway township in East India to the great city of Bombay. I'm sorry? Yeah. This is 1974, the great railway strike. Some of the younger people over here may not remember, it was one of the largest industrial actions ever in history. That was going on. It was a pretty traumatic journey, but also a defining one for her. And this is the very end of that long journey across the country. Through the inky heart of 1974, the caterpillar crawled on. In the first
Patiently moving, a man who had yesterday been a few compartments down the corridor held court in her aisle. The mood felt fantastically different. He shushed everybody to calculate the speed from the frequency of the clicks on the track and announced the result. Once you take into account other stoppages, at the current rate we will reach in another 6.5 days. Ha 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 ha. People laughed with abandon. Some had been on the train for over 70 hours. Really, the journey was indeed coming to an end. Tropicality steamed in through the windows, the feeling of coast, then the comment-stricken conurbations, then more and more and more of everything. One stop remained in the anarchy of a city station. As the city injected itself into her bloodstream, she felt knocked out. Sound clouds, people swoons like she had never heard or seen. No next step could be devised in the face of an arbitrariness so large. She felt slayed by the gigantry of her folly. The stunned rake inched into the terminus. The thousands of inhabitants emptied out like a plague village. Migrants, runaways, their boxes, buttonholes, slippers, infants, ambitions, compulsions pouring out into the platform underneath the tremendous roof of steel and light. Whereupon they resumed on foot like an ancient caravan. At the concourse, the caravan was fissioned into infinity by countless commuters. These vigorous city commuters were kineticized by a hissing in-breath, out-breath that appeared to be a form of commuting release. Now she was distracted by a different nature of mouth sound. apocalypse, and close to the ones that went she realized they were meant for her to move aside. She did, on unsteady legs folded too long. Drumming into successively parallel streams of human movement, she strayed into an era built like a cathedral. Marvelous pillars, marvelous golden stars above. But here the mere ticket counters, above them stained glass. Behind them, the water containers, sleek modern cylinders, not plumb teapots. She was
At the exit, edging past the threshold of inside and outside in the heat of her unbelievable folly, and the pigeons hustling and hurrying as though themselves wait for a last train. One alighted on a beastly projection in the facade and emptied itself on her head. Vandana, it is good luck, a man said, brushing past her, without glancing at her, and pointed away into the crowd. She shifted out of the stream. So many women, smokeresses, workers, idlers, women who looked like machines, like mannequins, like ragamuffins, groups of marching women beating rolling pins on steel plates, demanding the end of price rise. Wiping the pigeon shit with her mother's monogram handkerchief that had served her well over the past 2 days, exhaling a deep breath that collapsed in a puddle on the toes, determined to make inquiries at the stop where the deck-red buses wheezed and resumed with great asthmatic roars. Into the city of Bombay stepped Miss Chitto.
What Rahul does sometimes with like words he uses, smoker races. I find that away. I'm going to put that in some use somewhere. I'll credit you, but I'm taking it. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so some of you may have attended my session earlier this morning. Some of you may not have. Very quickly, my book is set in the Second World, and basically one time period is between August 1941 and January 1943, and the other timeline running parallelly is from the 60s, actually the 70s. A person and various people are looking back at those two critical years in Calcutta's history from the vantage point of the 70s. Remember, the 70s is before computers, before television in India. So you are still looking at cassette decks and read-to-read recorders and the radio and notebooks, and your archiving and archaeology of history is all to do with written stuff and photographs and tape recordings and some film material which is not in this book. Film material isn't in the book. But it's that kind of looking back at history, not to be able to do today with, on Instagram or YouTube or the internet and stuff. So it's a very different perception of history that was there in 1970. I tried to catch that as well. But this particular portion is about something that happens in Calcutta on August 13th, 1942. Gandhi declares Quit India movement and Quit India in Bombay on August 7th. And immediately he and the other Congress leaders, all the leaders like Nehru, Patel, Azad, all these guys are just arrested immediately by the British authorities. And for all his desire for a non-violent revolution, a non-violent protest, what this leads to is violent and quasi-violent protests, and really seething protest marches break out all over the country. When you look at an old train that was called August Kranti Express, or we talk about August Kranti. August Kranti is that August revolution, which actually the unrest and the whole upheaval in the cities and the villages and everything stays alive from early August through September into early October, while the war is going on, while other things are happening in rural areas of Bengal. And this is a moment on August 13th where a protest march against the arrest has been called at Wellington Square. And the protesters are meeting cops on horses who've got, and tear gas has been released already in different parts of town and stuff. But one of the protagonists, who's called Gopal, he's a young criminal. He starts off as a pickpocket but then gets into more serious business. Right now he's delivering contraband medicines to different medicine stores in a little three-wheel kind of tempo with his driver. And they're driving up a street called Wellesley Street, now called Rafi Ahmed Kidwai Street if you know Calcutta. And they are aware that the whole town is that there's turbulence and, upheaval and stuff going on across the city, and basically the streets are completely deserted. So says, look at that, the driver says, shaking his head. People are truly going mad these days. The driver, Gopal says, what? So he says, no, I meant look over there, straight on the right. As the driver slows down, Gopal looks up to see what the man is pointing at. Further up Wellesley Street, someone has hung a huge Congress tricolour from their building. The flag seems to pour out of the top floor balcony of a 6-story house, like a bowled alcala. Saris and dhotis and odd bits of cloth stitched together to form the orange, white and green stripes cascading down in a long drape over the balconies below and stopping just between the second and first floors. 2 mounted police are trying to pull it down, both standing in their stirrups and grabbing at the cloth that's dancing in the breeze just out of reach. Remember, the tricolour has just been formulated as a possible flag for an independent India, right? Independent India is very far away right now, and then people are talking about some strange thing called Pakistan, which everyone says is Jinnah's idea of a joke, that he's putting it forward as a kind of a gambit to get more power in independent India, because no one can have Pakistan. So it's this moment in history where the tricolour is this kind of idea of a country and an idea of a flag, right? But it's illegal. Whatever wind is moving the flag, it doesn't reach the van. The stinging in his eyes grows sharper, and Gopal reaches for the cloth he keeps behind the seat to wipe his face. As he turns, he sees the driver has already wrapped his head in his own gamcha, leaving a narrow gap through which to see. He sees the man's eyes are streaming with water and realizes what is happening. As he quickly wraps his head, he wonders about the sharp pain and how the tear gas can be stabbing him in the leg. He hears but doesn't see the horse's front hooves. Then the rear were right in front of his face, slamming down on the bonnet of the van, sending the protruding metal piece into his calf again, just as the driver kicks the brake and the windscreen comes and smacks his head. Eyes spinning, Gopal tries to right himself, but too quickly. The dizziness pushes him back and his nose is filled with a new stink, which he knows is not blood. He reaches between his legs, not quite accepting he has piss in his hands, but everything there is dry. The only wetness is on the outside of his left leg, below his knee, where he has been gashed. He understands he's smelling the driver's urine and not his own, and that seems to be the most important thing. The sound of the hooves crowds his ears and he ducks instinctively, but the horses gallop past, this time missing the van. 2 more mounted police join the mama who has nearly trampled them, all 3 chasing after a bunch of young men who seem to have appeared out of thin air. The group went straight towards the 2 cops who have now jointly pincered the edge of the flag with their bamboo lathis. The chasing police shout out and the 2 turn to look, dragging the flag with them. Then the police chase the guys and there's a charge of, they come across one guy and he jumps into a garbage, into garbage bin. And it doesn't help him. The 2 cops, one of these men who's running, jumps into like a garbage bin that used to be there. The 2 cops have spotted him through the mess of the flag cloth and they canter over to the basket. The savagery with which they start bringing down their lathis on the basket tells Gopal how very aware the mamas are of people laughing at them from behind the windows all down the street. As he manages to sit up fully, Gopal sees the 3rd horse cop join the 2, all 3 of them almost fighting with each other to get at the man in the garbage basket. The horses whinny, the mamas shout, now exultant in their rage, bits of rubbish fly in the air as a man struggles to escape the blows. A bit of a banana leaf catches him into sunlight as it arcs into the air. Yellow-brown rubbish mud spreads on the slate-grey pavement stones. An empty coconut shell shoots out from below the stationary carriage, rolling to a stop on a tram track. The man's light clean kurta begins to get streaked with red, reminding Gopal of the buffalo sacrifices he has seen. His head still bringing Gopal's chief thoughts to get out alive, and he grabs the driver's shoulder and shakes it. The driver whimpers, tries to move and collapses back in the seat. The sound of more horses turns Gopal into a statue. A Gora officer brings his mount to a stop right next to his van. Listen here, Gilbert, tell your men not to get caught up. There are others getting away. This man's talking to one of his subordinates. Gopal can make out almost all the words the Gora bastard is shouting. Leave your mark on them, but as many of the buggers as you can. I'm going around to Dharamtala Street now. Carry on, good chap. The Anglo salutes again and wheels his horse around. The Gora sets off down the side street on the left, Anglo being the Anglo-Indian, the one from which the horses have come. Neither has paid any attention to the van or the 2 of them inside. In a minute or so, the horses have disappeared. A moment later, a door opens. 3 men and a woman come out and carry the limp, blood-soaked body of the man into the house. Far down Wellesley Street, Gopal can now see commotion and smoke, but around him the streets are empty.
So, where does it begin? Okay, just listening to this passage that Richard just read, you have, this is when there's global British rule in India, and you have protesters, or people who don't quite agree with the empire, and the police and the forces of the empire, then of course react with brutality and violence. And then, of course, you have an independent India which we fashioned for ourselves and which we inhabit now, or an idea with which we inhabit now. And then there are protests. There are people who agree with this momentarily or for a longer period with this idea that you have. And then when you have the forces of the state react in a similar manner and suppress, then for most people, it isn't the same. You think that's different. That was a foreign kind of power reacting, and therefore that brutality was wrong. But a similar brutality, by the state, which is India, is not seen. So what I'm trying to say is that this whole idea of India also shifts. It depends on who is at the receiving end of the generosity of the state and the brutality of the state. Why I thought that is important is because there's, there are different ideas of India that I've explored in these novels and other novels because. So what is India? And there are moments in your different books where, some idea emerges, not maybe yours, but one of the characters. And so Rahul, coming to you, this bit where Charles' father, I think it is at some point, who, just one sentence which says, when the census is happening, and it's quite amazing, the whole. And at that time it was just about 400 plus million or a little less, and now they're 1.4 billion. But at that time the census is happening, I said that's amazing. And for the rest of the world, that's like, what an amazing thing that they put together, this India. People expect to do things. Anyways, he is saying about the census that it has to be completed in a month for one thing. This time just 20 days. And then she says, amazing. And he says, isn't it? General election, census, railways, these things go across the full country and the army. So these are these large things which you can give you an idea of India. And Charu discovers for herself a kind of India and a kind of life for herself. Just wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Was that, to you, obviously you created Charu, it might be difficult for you to think of her as an individual with an idea, but what I found really interesting was the journey of discovery that she made of India, of people that she lives with, will be living with, intimate relations that she'll have to negotiate or set aside, and all of that is India. And the railway is central, and in many ways the railway is also, India. Was there this larger idea of India that was at the back of your mind when you were writing this novel?
Strangely, yes. I say strange because I worked with this larger idea right at the very start. And then I kind of descended into the character and the world making of the novel. And from the idea of what using a vast enterprise that gestures at the scale and complexity of this country, which came into being in 1947, the Republican Project, which stitches together this astonishing variety and types of people in these great numbers across this geography. An institution which suggests that, such as the railways or the census, how I could place an individual inside this huge idea, and how these two things react with one another. Can this actually be an intimate bond between what seems like a vast superstructure and the person who's inside it, an ordinary person? And then when I realized I needed a person who inhabits this world. And then I actually started building a novel city. So, and then that idea kind of receded to the background. It informed the novel all the way as I followed this one life. And I think it's what actually makes this country. It is our individual idea of this creation. I mean, we all have affinities of family and friendship and all of that. They're born into linguistic communities, caste identities, religious identities, topographical identities for some people, riverine people, hill people, all of that. But then there is something that stitches us together, which is our relationship with each other. And there are different sets of ideas and connections. What is it that brings us all together in this country? What is the nature of that bond? It's a really interesting thing. Even if we don't actively think about it all the time, it's informing our life every day. When we migrate, when we go to other places. I say this in a state which perhaps is the most diverse in India.
A great many ethnicities have been multiple amount of immigration, especially in the 20th century. What happens when you travel by train and share basically the bedroom and sleeper compartment with total strangers and we're rubbing off on one another? What happens when we bring these things out into the city? What is the India that is emerging from these energies and interactions with one another? Wake up. So yeah, that is what basically I think emerges from fictional exploration of India through the story of travel. Even though I say this is an idea which then started receding, but it was still, I think, moving forward in a pretty crucial way. I think that is what is interesting, that you had this large idea and then you narrowed down to her life and what she's discovering, because at the end of the day,
You can have an India, you can have a country, you can have whatever, but it will acquire substance in the individual mind, how each individual will have to make sense of that, and India will have to make sense with every individual for it for it to have any English. So staying with that, in your
case, you very explicitly say it's a novel. You have a subtitle which would suit a non-fiction work more, like the story of the last 50 years. But it's a novel, and yet when we were having a conversation earlier at lunch, you had for yourself a very clear idea of what India is as an idea, as a civilization perhaps, and to you, there is an India that we inhabit, which is a post-1947 or even 1950 kind of creation. But you see it as a much older thing, a continuity that endures. Would you want to talk a little bit about that? Which, of course, I have to say, and I hope I'm not making it, I'm not kind of making it a little, difficult, in the sense that it might, because I know what the idea is, it could also be an idea that could be appropriated by people, if you know what I mean, to kind of reduce the whole idea of India. So are you kind of conscious of that when you champion this civilizational continuity? So, Ravi, I started writing this book because of a comment in my friend's circle. And that comment was that the change we've witnessed in India in our lifetime has been breathtaking. So that's where this idea started from. And I thought, okay, let me write on the last 50 years of India and this change, a little bit of which I read out as well. But when I started writing on this social, cultural, economic change in India in the last 50 years, I found that I was constantly felt the need to go back centuries. So for example, and I was writing from a very common lens, as I have seen it change. So I was writing about how I used to see my grandmother perform havans in the home every day. She was an Arya Samaji and she would perform these havans. Now when I was writing about that, and it made me think about those mantras she would chant, it then made me find out a little bit more about the Vedas. It then made me wonder about the dating of the Vedas. When I write about my friends and I looking for professional programs, higher education in pursuit of a better life, it then took me back to the fact that Indians have always seen education and higher learning as a locomotive for their progression, for livelihood and for their progression. So that then takes me back to ancient universities and how great those universities was. So yes, while my focus was only on the last 50 years of India, but I just couldn't divorce it from the thousands of years of civilization. And one of the reviewers actually wrote in, I don't know if it was in the paper or a blogger, who says that while the book tries to focus on last 50 years of India, but it also covers, sweeps 5,000 years of Bharatiya civilization. So that's how where I started from, where I ended was very different. The book has been a discovery for me, as I wanted to write accurately about and give some information about what these Havans was, what was higher learning, what sleeping on the terrace used to be all about, what test match cricket was all about, what happened when color TV got introduced, and then how the life was in the 70s and 80s. So I'm constantly moving between those two eras, last 50 years and last 5,000 years.
Why was that
Kind of connection or that enterprise of bringing this larger thing, because the bulk of the book actually is about this character growing up in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and then of course a little bit of the 90s also, but the most interesting ones are the 70s and the 80s. And we'll come to the cricket, I think, right at the end, because all three here, anyway, but I'll come to that later. So why was that important for you? And to come back to that question that I had, were you ever a little, let's say, concerned about that this actually does, it invites a certain kind of person who takes this, to my mind, facile and often dangerous pride in ancient, therefore everything is best, and we are the custodians of everything that is Indian, the others are not, and this whole thing of motherland, fatherland, all of that. So was that ever a concern? Very much so. In fact, there is a chapter titled Pride, Criticism and Responsibility, where I have created these two protagonists who think differently. And one of them is talking of cultural pride, the other is talking of a collective sense of guilt. So should we be proud of the fact that yoga was invented here? Or should we be guilty and concerned about the fact that bulk of our population is unhealthy? Should we just take pride in the fact that we have the best of architecture, science, astronomy, statecraft? Or should we have a sense of collective guilt that today we are, we don't follow processes properly. We are looking for jugaad all the time. So both the things were playing in my mind. And that's why I have presented both the things in the book. That's the contradiction of my mind. So I presented the full contradiction here. I don't make any prescriptions in the book. There's no grandstanding there at all. But both sides are presented. Cultural pride versus a collective sense of guilt.
And you wanted to speak a little bit about the title there, which I find interesting, Tempest on Riverside. What that's an
intriguing title, right? So the way I conceive the title, River for me is River of Life. There is a root stage, a maturity stage, and it inevitably fall in the sea. But what is distinctive about the river is that it is always moving, and that's what keeps it fresh. So the symbolism there, and it comes to the previous comment that you made there, Ravi, the symbolism is that if we as individuals or societies or a nation start holding on to any belief or any idea too rigidly, then you lose freshness, you lose vitality, you lose friends. So that's the symbolism of the river. Tempest here, of course, it means storm, but the way I mean tempest is a zeal for curiosity, eagerness for knowledge, for challenge. One of the building blocks of our society, of our civilization, is Shastrat, or discussion. That challenge must never be lost in our country. We must challenge each other, we must challenge our whatever ideas we are holding on to, because that's the only way to progress. 300 years ago, if we thought that Newtonian physics was the last word in physics, we would never have reached the stage of quantum physics. So the message in Tempest is that we must continue to challenge ourselves. We must continue to discuss, must continue to debate. And silent, of course, is the silence of the heart, it's the language of emotion, it's the silence of the universe. And somewhere I see silence also reflecting the loneliness of the human soul. The way we are created, and this is just my understanding, everybody can have different views, is that every
soul is a lonely soul in this world. So that's how I constructed Tempest of River Silent. But very interestingly, most of the reviewers, whether in print media or bloggers, have interpreted River Silent as the ongoing, ancient, rich heritage of India, and Tempest as the winds of change which are blowing on it. And so there's a confluence between modernity and tradition which we face today. So I meant it differently, but it's been interpreted differently, and I must say that the other interpretation is equally plausible.
Well, that's it.
I mean, readers make what they will of you write a book and then you have no control over how to do it. Richard, and would you turn the book that way, because it reminded me of something that you said in that previous conversation, is to do again with the title of your book. And we were talking about, Calcutta doing this, and you have this line that the massive everything which is Calcutta, so Calcutta's universe. And you said that, which, and the Great Eastern Hotel where, some of the characters live, that is a universe in itself, but why you decided to call this book Great Eastern Hotel is because it is, in a sense, the city, Calcutta is a hotel. But do you think it also then you could extend it to say India, of course yes the world, but let's stay with India right now, is also a hotel. India is a Great Eastern Hotel, and it made not only the people who come and go, who live there, who make the kitchen run in a sense, or the people at the front desk, etc., but also India and Indians, everybody, even those who visit, who make a connection briefly and go with it, they also contribute to the making of the idea of India. And so Great Eastern Hotel is India itself. Would that be a way of looking at it?
You could make that stretch, I think, because I mean, as both this Sanjeev and Rahul both said, I mean, the whole, Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, these are universes within themselves, but at the same time, there's that famous joke where one of people's rivals figured out that they'll get Akbar to ask people, how many crows are there in Agra? And that would stump people who knows everything, and people is not bothered at all. So this is why Jahanpura there are exactly 1154 crows in Agra. So this is how can you possibly know that? It's very simple. That's how many there are. And the other people like, how? This is where if there are more crows, then there are crows who are visiting from outside. And if there are fewer crows, then our crows have gone to visit other people outside. So whenever I see this, the CAA and all these kind of things being brought in, and this whole business of the Bangladesh border being used as a political tool, to my mind, we are a vast subcontinent and resource rich, not in the terms of uranium or coal or anything of that, but our human resources are so wide that if a few thousand or 100,000 Rohingya come in, or some Afghan refugees come into this country, or if there are Ismailis who are being prosecuted and Pakistan come into the country, nothing is going to shift. It's a big shift. And we should have the openness and generosity, I feel, not just of letting other people in, but other cultures in. And the whole idea of Bharat, when we look back at our ancient Indian history, the amount of exchange we had with Africa, with Arabia, with the Arabic zone, with the Southeast Asian zone. I mean, it was massive. India was a transit point. People were constantly coming, people were constantly going. And that's how this culture that we're so proud of got forged. And it is, like you said, it's a river. It's a constantly changing, shifting river. And to try and dam it and put it into, sort of still lakes which are festering, is just such a lunatic idea to my mind. And I think all our novels, I haven't read yours, but I have a feeling that all our novels somewhere look at the past of how the country was formed. Like there's an image in my book where you're flying over the Sundarbans and there are all these small islands. We're going back up the river, we're winding up the river. And these islands kind of coalesce into a single stream, and that's the Ganga. in your thing, you know, the way you describe Bombay in that wonderful sequence when Indira Gandhi is dead and the child is walking through the Maidan, and the different kinds of people and the different kinds of food and the different kinds of energies that make up the palm fronds have to be in the right, the lovely line you have. You know, this is cosmopolitanism, but not cosmopolitanism as the West understands it. It is genuinely the ability to adjust and exchange with people who are different from you. We can be parochial, we can be very, very sort of inward looking and insular, but at the same time, you know, a third class or a second class, very big apartment. You know, you're cheek by jowl, thigh by thigh, armpit by armpit, next to some complete stranger, and you're managing and you're talking to them and you're exchanging food, and sometimes you're fighting, sometimes you eat what is next to you. But overall, in a crowded bus or a Bombay local or a Calcutta local or a Calcutta minibus, my God, you know, I mean, people, you know, you're literally letting the whole city come and leave its impress upon you, and you are leaving your impress upon dozens of bodies every day. That is a normal Indian's life. It is not sitting in Antilla and, you know, looking at the sea from there or whatever it is, right? So, I mean, somewhere where these novels reflect that, you know, we're talking about the messy mass of people that we are. And it cannot be fixed, it cannot be, I mean, it's crazy to try and fix it. And fix, I mean, by to make it, still it, you know, like a photograph or a frozen frame. I mean, that's just counterintuitive, stupid, and dangerous. And, you know, sorry.
No, I love that the way
You said it, put it in some book somewhere. It's like, you know, still waters will fester, and that's true. And, you know, given the kind of, you know, the subject this is, I have a feeling, and I hope I'm right, is that there will be at least, there are more than a few people here who want to ask
questions or make a comment on this about even outside the novels, in the novels of our own lives, in our own heads, you know, the idea of India or what it is or even you know, overstating the idea of India or the idea of America or the idea of Canada, or you know, at the end of the day, maybe we just convince ourselves that this kind of thing of nationality matters
more than it actually does. At least I mean, often when I'm sitting, I don't think of myself as an Indian. I'm thinking of myself, you know, okay, I'm here today doing something, I want this, my desire, what I lost, what I like, what friend I'd like to reconnect with. You know, those are the things that seem more immediate and more urgent and more, let's say, you know, what define me more if you can define. But then this thing of India. And of course, then we make these great narratives about India, some of them are really great narratives, but at the end of the day, they are just, it's just these notions, these ideas. But anyway, what would be nice in the next 10 or 15 minutes if we could have questions and comments from all of you. Yes, Guru. Hi everybody, I'm Pablo, really lovely reading of your works. Here in Gibraltar, I guess just a question I can ask. I think any
other place in India would be significant to you. So I'm going to ask, put this time into works. The idea of India ends at Kolkata in the east. The 45 million people in the northeast live forever in the margins of India, as you imagine. I never find a discourse other than the exotic corner of the world, a country that have a country mentioned. However, there is a one-sided pressure for the Northeast to assimilate with the mainstream, read the Hindi heartland. So do you, in any of your future stories, does this margin ever come to the center?
Well, I'm Joy over here, so maybe I should take this. I have a very active relationship with the Sam office here. In fact, just 10 days ago, Bhai Praveen Manas took the Rajdhani back from Bombay to Delhi. Now I'm back in Gibraltar. Lower Assam is a place that I've been visiting for the last 15 years because my wife has asked me.
So, and my children
much a part of my lived life. I'm going to move to my writing life in a moment. Also, my favorite place in Delhi, my favorite para in Delhi is Humayun. If you've ever been there, any Delhi people here? Okay, so this is the kind of northeastern enclave which is sprung up in Delhi, over a Jat village, and it is by far the most interesting and electric neighborhood in Delhi. So that's why we personally, earlier in the session I was talking about the longest piece of journalism I've actually done, 16,000 words. It could be a little book at one point. I thought of making it one. Has been set in Assam, in Lower Assam. It was centered around the riot in 2012, which I've then followed its afterlife for about 4 years. And that gave me, sent me into so many streams of reading about Assamese history and culture, which I find has then informed my idea of India, even though the Northeast itself is not explicitly very present in this book. There are kind of few areas it slips in. She has a roommate from Assam, she's in the working women's hostel. There's a kind of narration between one of the people who come to look after her, who recalls the childhood trip when she was young, when she went to the famous Loki Puja of Bijni, and she was a woman, and she really wanted to shoot the bow and an arrow. And there were two old women, and people were laughing at them, but they decided to do it. There's another case when was a welfare inspector, and she kind of goes into borderland looking for who should get the death benefits of the porter who has died. And she said, I'm a welfare inspector, and the Boro movement agitation is coming up at that point. And the woman she's asking gets terrified. She thinks she's some kind of police inspector, and she runs away because she's a London inspector. Anyway, so these are kind of very small presences in the novel, but thinking about an area of India which has at least 275 ethnicities, people who an area of a part of India which is constantly negotiating identity more than any other part. And what that means, you see what happened in Manipur, you see what's happening in Assam right now, when identity can be weaponized, when identity can be both a symbol of what this incredible part of this country stands for, as well as something that divides people in those lines. I think if one understands the Northeast, one's idea of what we call mainland India will be immeasurably enriched.
Should I also address that? Well, what's your name, sir? Guru. Guru, you're so right when you are at this made me wonder how much of Northeast India have I touched in the 640 pages.
And other than mention of tea estates and Brahmaputra, I have not mentioned anything else. Because this is my first time here in Northeast actually. So you're very right that I have missed out Northeast. I have had very limited interaction also with people from Northeast. So to that extent, your observation is absolutely right. I must say, however, I don't know what will happen in future, but I must say that something that I've been observing is chatting casually with my friends is that increasingly I find that the workforce in hospitality and retail is coming from Northeast, all parts of India. So that is something I see. Where it will lead to, I can't say. But, your observation is absolutely right.
Again, I'm also ashamed is not the word. I'm a bit startled. This is the first time I've ever come to the Northeast. I've never been. I've been to Bangladesh, I've been to Burma, I've been to Thailand, but never to the, So my idea of India doesn't stop at Calcutta, but I understand exactly what you mean. But I think the demographics of different things, Humayun, I was teaching in Kriya, so we had hospitality industry, a lot of people working there. It's shifting and changing. And I think, also in the universities, different people coming up, different music groups, all kinds of things in the younger sort of media and social media sphere. I think the balances of the Northeast being marginalized and being looking down at as exotic and all the slurs and all the insults and assaults and all, I think at least in the cities in India, in the rest of India, that is shifting. And I think in the next 10 years we're going to see some kind of a shift, no matter who's in charge in Delhi, no matter what the political, there is a certain life that society has volition and velocity. that I think that's all going to start shifting. And hopefully there will be a chance for me to come here and also engage with different aspects of the Northeast. And I cannot say what I will write in the future or anything, but hopefully, yes, I would hope.
Last year we went, my family and I,
The first time to Mizoram, and which is now being actually going to be connected by the train line, and that's a source of anxiety for them. They realize it's good for business, but what does it mean for people coming in and taking the same kind of insecurities that various parts of the Northeast has. But it's very important for so-called more mainland Indians to be in the places and look at the country as if that is like to be in Mizoram and think of Mizoram as the center. And from here, from this vantage point, we are looking at this country sitting out, We are not
Delhi-centric, Bombay-centric, whatever, that is the disservice to India. And when you go to Aizawl, it's so much its own
place, so much unlike other places in India. Our two young daughters adored it. She's like one of the best places they've ever been to, and we really want to go there. And I think that's very important for us to think of all of these places as the center from which we look at this kind of subcontinent, as Ruchi said, expanding.
Before the next question, I'm just reminded of, she hasn't come, Mama.
She left yesterday. Oh, I haven't seen her. Okay. Okay. So, like Dhruva, another really dear friend of mine, Maman, and so there's a book that she wrote, lovely book called Stupid Cupid, which is the second one after Legend of Spencer. And in that, I really love one passage where there is this person from Arunachal who studied in the 70s in university in Delhi. And she comes back after a while and opens a little small establishment, kind of a lover's nest, because an aunt left it to her in Jorba. It's a very Tony area of Delhi. And one of the cousins comes from the village back in Arunachal. And then she and a male friend of hers, also from Arunachal, who they connect and who was living in Delhi for a long time, they go out to Connaught Place. And then they they get a little late, they want to come back. And then there's this taxi that they kind of flag down, but this very aggressive Delhi small family woman and man they get in, and this they say, no, this is ours, you can't take it, but this one said that, we flag you down first. So that one says, go back to your country, whoever you are, or wherever you China, or whatever. And this cousin of this protagonist, this Arunachali woman, must be 30s and all, nice rustic strength that she had, and she grabbed her, which she was wearing, I think, a dress and a jeans, grabbed her by the collar and said, you get out of here. This is our taxi. And the taxi guy, she's thumping on the taxi and says, tum mujhko nahi leke jayega. And he had to stop and she pulled them out and said, this is our taxi, now we go. Now, that might seem like an idealistic, but that's the way to do it, I would think. Or damn all, wherever you are, whichever part of it, it's your human dignity and your confidence. The way you would react to rudeness anywhere else, you react to rudeness, in the center or whatever, is what I thought. I just love that, character. Stupid Cupid, the book is called. This is just one incident. Any other questions?
Guys, this seems a bit short-lived, project I delivered. We could have gone on this, but I think Sandeep and Ruchi have very explicitly outlined for us what India is not. Okay? And in the current context of the kind of jingoism we are seeing, my question to you is, and I'd like all of you to weigh in on this, how would you guys like to see India? I mean, given the skewed idea of nationalism which we are subject to right now, okay, or the kind of jingoism which we are seeing and which is kind of distorting a lot of minds, especially down the line, kids getting indoctrinated and stuff like that. Where would you like to see, how would you guys like to see India? And this is a question which is open to the panel.
So this is a discussion we have almost every second day these days, don't we? Anyway, I have just a single word for this. Easier said than done though, but the way I look at it is meritocracy. If we make this country a pure meritocracy, That's where I would like to see it go. As I said, easier said than done.
You want to see it as a meritocracy?
I want to see India as a total meritocracy.
Perfect, yes, okay.
I mean, when Richie was giving his answer to your question about will India be seen as a hotel, I was reminded of Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay novella. I think it's called the Aroshwani Hotel. And so, is that the most expansive idea that the government can think of this country to be? Or can we think of a hotel which has many different types of adarshata and non-adarshata, where you have all kinds of various range of imaginations that we can, and activity and energies that we can put into the hotel? What would be the hotel which kind of sense the thrill of living in a society like this inside us? Yeah.
I'm going to perhaps say something slightly controversial. I hope not. What I want to see one day in the future, and I've written about this, I actually wrote about it, right after 26/11. I said this may be a dark moment, but within a few decades, there will be trains leaving Beatty Station, Kolkata and Peshawar. There will be trains crossing Bangladesh and going all the way to Burma. This is going to happen, this will need to happen. Because what is happening around the world, when you look at it, every big power is interested in keeping us divided from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. It is to their advantage. And when the Europeans form a union and when they manage to make it work, and I know it's under trouble right now, but at its peak, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it made Europe and the EU Europe such a strong place. It's not funny. There's such bitter enemies as France and Germany. You could just drive across those borders. Within 20 years of the Second World War ending, 1945, I went there as a kid in 1975, 30 years. I could not believe that, you just crossed over a country where the last thing I knew about a Second World War nerd was tank battles. This is where the Panzers were, this is where Patton's tanks were, or this is where the Germans made a blitzkrieg to destroy France in 1940. And before that, the 19th century, early 20th century, the bitter, brutal fighting between these countries. Right? And you can see, I don't know how Ukraine will end, but the way Europe is shifting and moving right now, whether it's Poland or Latvia or what's happening, it may crumble, the EU, but as an idea, it's something we need to take very seriously, because as I try and explain to people who sort of say, "Hum Hindu hai, hum Musliman hai, ye hai," I said, when you go, you all want your kids to go to America or to England or to Europe. And when you go there, they are not looking at you and saying, you're Bangladeshi or you're Indian or you're Pakistani. They just look at you, and for them you're an unspecific brown South Asian. And they may choose to call you Indian, they may choose to call you, the derogatory word for Pakistani, or whatever. They're not bothered about your religion or your caste or, whether you're South Indian or North Indian or, Northeast perhaps, yes, okay, they may connect people here more to Thailand, Burma, etc., because just out of racial stereotyping or whatever. But overall, when you look at the country, and so I want to see in India where the borders are porous, where we can be secure enough in our own identity and in our own thing to have a very strong cultural identity which is not overpowering its minorities, nor are we afraid of being taken over by non-existent demographic threats, and where, all kinds of religious extremism, whether it's Islamic extremism or Hindutva extremism or Sinhala Buddhist extremism, that is a thing of the past. The people are free to practice their different myriad religions and different versions of, none of these religions are homogeneous. And along with that would be a meritocracy and a certain rule of law and a certain equality for men and women first of all, and then, sort of less of a gap between the rich and the poor. Maybe it's a utopia, but actually if we don't aim for this, we're never going to get out of this. We're never going to get anything better. So.
I really also not like Parsis to dwindle.
Parsi should people use more.
Oh, yeah. You guys should adopt every Parsi as an extinct species. You guys should adopt each of us. And we will like, and you know, the finances are taken care of. Anyway. But Ravi, my question is to you, complementing is that how difficult is it to get this kind of like when Ruchi was speaking, I seriously saw the beginning of a novel, about America not judging you for why your religion. I mean, I've seen this actually as a protagonist, and how difficult is it to get literature like this out in this day and age? If you could answer on behalf of the publishing industry.
I can't certainly answer on behalf of those who publish books and sign agreements with the Rumi French. And that's not just one publisher. There are others too, but let's not get into that. I'm not saying that some of us who do publish or have been lucky in that whatever little pushing the boundaries or pushing back against singular ideas that we've done is not so much bravery, it's just doing what you think, not self-censorship is the problem, I think greater problem than actual censorship right now. And that's only, and I'm speaking as an English language publisher, that is because to the present looms, there are other looms as well. The fanatic
and the dispensation that we are some of us have put into place. English books in English really don't matter.
So to some extent they're under the radar, I suppose. It is social media. It is journalism in the Indian languages other than English, and that's another thing I'll come back to that when I say that. I think that is where their focus is there. Which isn't to say that there isn't a risk involved. Of course, there's a risk involved, but we'll see when something happens, right? Violence is what I would worried about than legal stuff, because at least you can go to court, and which isn't to say that we have great faith in courts, but it's a more civil way at least of settling differences. And then you just continue to do what you're doing. I mean, what the hell? Why are we in this business? Otherwise, we should be doing something else. But to your other question about what we'd like to see in kind of India, I would say is that I would like an India where this whole the Indian identity is worn very infrequently. And with an awareness of it being just one small part of everybody's identity. You set that aside and, and I would say, make friends, just love, romantic love, sexual love, just open your eyes to how many people there are around you. And if you could just love a lot of people, romantically, sexually, have friendships, I think, that's the kind of... It's a very transcendental vision. That's why transcendental? I mean, why is it transcendental? It's just that even the best of us, let's say best, who are not bigoted, how often do we put ourselves in situations where we will interact with somebody we wouldn't normally even see? True. Right? And I can, I've seen persons who does a lot of it, but I have been surprised by just how rewarding in many ways it has been to form a relationship, not even a considered one, it just happened. Right. With somebody I would never even have thought of, not because I didn't, it's just that my eyes were not open to this kind of person. I get that. That's what I mean. Shall we? I think it's time, yeah? Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. Yeah.
Also taken over the moderation of
As we draw this enabling session to a close, we are reminded that India is not a singular narrative but a constellation of stories, diverse, layered, complex, and continually evolving. The reflection shared today...
I'm going to just interrupt very briefly because it reminded me about something which is that people will enjoy and I didn't bring up. Is that in all these three novels, cricket appears. And you know this. No, no, sorry. In yours, I'm just thinking of you rather than the novel. So one or two area, but he's written a book called Pandits in Pakistan. He is, one of his greatest passions is cricket. You, of course, written about cricket, but you also are an umpire. And so the reason why I haven't asked the question, perhaps subconsciously, is because I have no interest in cricket. So therefore, that doesn't make me an Indian either. No, I don't. No, I don't have any interest in cricket. I haven't had any interest in cricket since I think the early 2000s. No, it's just that so much of it happening. I said, don't stop it. Yeah, that's all. Sorry. Yeah.
On behalf of the Internals, the Literacy Festival 2026 at Junior University, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers for their valuable insight, to our rapporteurs for their insightful and thoughtful documentation, to our volunteers for their seamless coordination, and to all of you for your attentive and gracious presence. Thank you all.